And now, ladies and gentlemen, the Film Talk Guys.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of This Movie Needs More Flavor. I'm Adam.
I'm Josh.
Today we'll be covering the 1978 horror classic, Dawn of the Dead. George Romero's Dawn of the Dead is the follow-up to his 1968 cult classic, Night of the Living Dead. In Dawn of the Dead, we follow four protagonists. Steven, a news station pilot, his girlfriend Fran, who also works for the news station, and two SWAT team officers, Roger and Peter. The four of them flee zombie-infested Philadelphia and make their own way in order to find greener pastures. Along the way, they come across a shopping mall. After investigating the mall, the group soon decides to set up home to ride out the zombie wave in relative peace and tranquility. However, as with life, not everything goes to plan, and the problems of the outside world soon begin to creep back in. So Josh, what are your thoughts on Dawn of the Dead?
Well, the first thing I'd like to touch on is an aspect of this film's social commentary. Aside from the clear commentary on consumerism, there's this progression between this film and Night of the Living Dead that continues through Day of the Dead, that although the zombies are a formidable and overwhelming opponent, they're not a comparable force when you compare them to us. You see it escalate throughout this film. In the open, you've got what you constantly see in today's news media, experts arguing over what the best solution is rather than anybody attempting to put a solution into practice. You see it when Flyboy almost takes out Peter, and you finally see it culminate in Peter making the rash decision to attack the roving bikers over them stealing money rather than laying low, and the bikers being the ones who ultimately tear down everything they've secured themselves.
Yeah, that reoccurring theme of working together or dying, sinking or swimming, getting used to one another, having to live with one another, and kind of being your own worst enemy. It's a constant theme throughout George Romero's zombie films.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the probably the most poignant and depressing example is the character of Roger. Because ultimately, it's not Roger's ego that gets him. It's not we got this by the ass. It's what's fueling his ego. And in my opinion, what's fueling this dude's ego is desperation and the knowledge that ultimately they're fucked. And it's his way of fighting back against what he already knows, but he doesn't want to admit. And he fights it to the very end with that, we whipped them, and we got it all. And you hear his desperation in that, and that is, again, depressing but poignant.
His character is really interesting because, for as small as he is, he's the guardian. You know, he's the go-getter. He's taking care of things. You're safe in his hands.
He wants to take the lead. He's ready to. He's prepared to. But where's it coming from?
Right. And then that rug just gets pulled out from underneath.
Everyone, from all of us. And we get another example in the character of Flyboy, Steven. And this time, it's not merely ego, but it's utter ineptitude.
The guy's a dope.
Truly, he could not clean it up. I mean, his attempted attack on the zombies at the airfield.
Yeah.
He goes to bash that one dude with a hammer, and he straight up hits him with his armpit.
I still don't understand what the point of that was, even to this day. But it's funny. It's good for a laugh.
It is. It's definitely good for a laugh, and it's good to cite just who this guy is automatically.
Please let me be helpful.
And I mean, right after that, he tries to pop a zombie and almost tags Peter, and then proceeds to act butthurt on the flight to the mall. And then he furthers it with his contempt towards Fran for wanting to learn how to fly. And it's like, look, dude, it's established you're the candy ass in this situation, all right? Nobody here wants you being the only one who can get us out of here.
Speaking of Fran, the actress who played her, Galen Ross, she actually wanted to portray a strong and capable woman. She was told numerous times by George Romero, the standard thing is scream, scream, ah. And she acts helpless at certain times, or hey, somebody save me. But she didn't do it with such abandon. She wanted to make it very clear that, hey, my character's capable. It's not completely in your face. It's reasonable. And it really, really works. And I think that kind of added the whole Steven and Fran kind of like jostling for, hey, I want to take care of you. Hey, I'm going to be, the traditional kind of savior.
Exactly. I mean, she tries to explain to him that's not what she's looking for. That's not who she wants to be. And again, because of it, not merely his ego, but his ineptitude, he just doesn't acknowledge it. And he furthers that by, again, instead of laying low, he gets himself shot, he gets himself eaten, and in his final act of obliviousness, I mean, granted, he's already a zombie, he floats everybody right towards where they are.
He was a damn good zombie, though.
When they show him come out of there and his eyes are rolled back very well, yeah, I was impressed by that. I mean, that's his top end. That's the best of Flyboy, is when Flyboy's a zombie.
He was actually, if I'm not mistaken, he was going for a Lon Chaney mummy sort of performance. That was like his inspiration for it. Works.
Oh, he sold it. Next is something I'd like to start with actually your take on, and that's the practical effects in this film. Now, obviously, there's a stylistic nature to them, but overall, do you think they held up? And is there a particular scene that you'd say nails it?
It works. It works. If you're looking for outright realism, if you're looking to get lost in it, then no. But for the resources they had, they did a stellar job. George Romero, he wanted to go for a comic look. Tom Savini didn't like the color of the blood. He didn't like how it looked. It was thick. It was almost pinkish the first time I saw it. George Romero was like, the hell with it. I want to go for a comic book sort of thing anyway, so let's go with it. So, all in all, it holds up for me. It's not going to hold up for, people who want a modern look on things. I admit that. But
because I got my scene, and I was wondering if you had a specific one, because
I do have a scene.
Okay, I'll go with mine first. It's when they're ripping apart Flyboy. That, I don't know if they're using real intestines or not.
They are.
It could easily, yeah, I can see it.
In fact, there were people on set who were begging to get to, eat the viscera just because they knew they would be on camera, front and center. So, yeah, Tom Savini, I think he went on record saying, he's like, dude, we had people throwing themselves at us.
That is an opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
And I would have been on board myself. But that's it. That moment, I'm like, if you're not buying this, take a look at that scene.
My scene is actually at the very beginning. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but it is when Miguel takes a bite out of his woman.
Mm-hmm. And finally, I just like to express my absolute love for this film. The first time I saw it, I can't remember my age. I was 13 or 14, but I do know I watched this movie 3 more times over that weekend. I had the time. I had it rented. I went and destroyed it. And what I appreciate the most is just how much consideration it evoked in me. I mean, this is the film that got me thinking about what I would do. And it was a defining moment because of that, because you see it in damn near every zombie film or television production today. And it basically all comes back to this film and they're establishing their security in the mall. And yeah, that's pretty much all I've got.
All right, man. Well, this film, I don't care how dated it looks. I don't care how cheesy certain things are. I absolutely love this film, and I always will. I remember I had to have been 12 years old when I first saw this film. I rented it at Blockbuster, and I was disgusted by it the first time I saw it. I didn't like it. I found it actually kind of disturbing because this was before, you had a lot of zombie movies out there, gory ones, but this was before the wave of zombie films that really got gory, got really violent and frenzied. So this kind of stuff is all you had if you were really going for zombie films. But there was something about it that drew me to it. It was just like, no, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. The minute I got back to that Blockbuster the next week, because I went like every weekend, boom, it was another rent. I couldn't resist. I'm like, there's something about this film. And from that second viewing, I was a little more acclimated to it. There was no looking back.
There's a train wreck compulsion towards this film, like where you saw it got you, and I mean maybe it's the fact that we both hit it around the same ages, but it stayed with me, it stuck with me, and that's why again that weekend it was nothing but Dawn, and part of it was my aversion to it, like that was real.
It's repulsive.
I gotta see it again.
There's so many bizarre things about this film. The effects, some of the dialogue, the music. I mean, Goblin did a fantastic job, but it's very European, it's very 70s. But everything comes together in a wonderful way for me. Very entertaining. So, some aspects of the film itself. You see old folks featured as zombies at the mall. It turns out that old folks would use the mall for their morning exercises. And during filming, they came around. George Romero was like, hey, you want to be zombies?
You guys are moving like turtles anyways.
So, yeah, there's a few of them featured in there, which I think is pretty cool. From what I'm aware of, he was very ingratiating. It's just like, hey, you want to be part of it? You have an idea? You want to do that? Oh, well, that's weird, but let's do it. Like the whole pie in the face thing. It makes no sense. There's no point to it. But why not?
There's no need for it, but it adds something. It adds an element of humanity to it that you don't get if you're just letting one person decide everything.
There's some times where when you throw stuff at a wall to see what lands, it works. Sometimes it's a train wreck. Sometimes it works.
Yeah, sometimes plenty of it sticks.
This always gets me. It bugs me because this is not what I would do. When they're rounding up the bodies in the mall, they start putting them in the freezers. I would not do that. Those freezers are mine now, and I am not giving them up to dead bodies. I'll figure out a way to respectfully, respectfully but expediently dispose of the bodies outside, but they're not going in that freezer.
Okay, watching Zombieland the other night. I mean, Bill Murray, someone who they respect and gun down. they, they drop his ass off the side of the house. No storage in the fridge. Like,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
yeah, the compulsion to keep them in some regard. I don't know why they went with that. But yeah, it wouldn't have been my move. I just tossed them off the side.
There are several different cuts of this film. There's probably more than several now that YouTube is up and all that. But when I first got into this, there was the theatrical, the extended or director's cut, and the European cut. And that is in part due to Dario Argento, the producer, Italian, having the rights to that. He cut up the film in his own way. He was allowed to, and he made it much quicker and more action-oriented. Even the music chosen for it from Goblin's selection reflected that. Then you have the theatrical, which I don't really care for it because it cuts up certain scenes. And it actually leaves it a little confusing. So I would go with the director's cut. It's a little bit longer, slightly more plotting. But you know what? Honestly, if this movie was 5 hours, I'd watch it anyway. There's just something about this film. Romero, like a number of his films, he brings, it's almost like a personal sense of disenfranchisement with culture, with society, even being Hispanic himself. You see that reflection in some of his movies, the way authority figures treat either people of color or the downtrodden. And you definitely see that towards the start of this film with the people in the tenement. So going back to Dario Argento, he was a huge admirer of George Romero. He found out that George Romero already had an idea for a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And he was thinking about writing a script, and Argento was like, no, you come on over to Italy. Come over to Italy. I got a place for you. You write it. We'll take care of everything. You just let the creative juices flow. So we did that. And the idea for the mall apparently came from the fact that Romero was friends with someone who owned a mall. And he was granted a tour of it. And as he's walking through it, he noticed the people walking around, almost like zombies, consumers. But he also thought, wait, wouldn't this be a cool place to hold up just in case an outbreak happened or, something like that. So all that came together. He met up with Argento, and, the rest is history. The mall, for those who may not be aware, is what I consider to be the famous Monroeville Mall in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. And the filming took place during the winter of 1977 and 1978, over a span of 4 months. It happened during the Christmas season. The crew only had a certain amount of time to film. So it was at night, early morning, then they're out. And they had to take a break over the Christmas season because they couldn't take down the Christmas dressings. It would have been too costly, inefficient. So that was how that filming went about. And from some of the stories I've heard from it, a lot of the extras from around the area, they would get drunk. I don't know if it was the Brown Derby bar within the mall, which is actually featured, or elsewhere. But they would get made up by Tom Savini and his production crew, and they would go out drinking.
Because hell yeah. I mean, I would do the same thing myself. We're done for the day. We look like hell. Let's do this.
Oh, no, they weren't done. No, like they got made up and they were waiting for the filming to start. And apparently,
quality folks.
So they'd come back and they'd be kind of sauced. And apparently that helped with their performances. They were a little more loose. They were a little more willing to be out of character. So, but that's another thing. And I want to say this here, and I've said it to many people. If I had a time machine, I would go back and be an extra on this film. There's plenty of things I could do, but that would be it.
Right. Your time machine opportunity right there. And yeah, I'd probably go right with you. So
absolutely, dude. Yeah, and apparently some of those drunk zombies caused damage to the mall by driving around in golf carts and this and that, having a good time. I mean, it's craziness. I love it.
All right. Yeah. And I'm sure they lived those moments up. I mean, you get the opportunity to drive something around indoors, you are going to take it for everything it's worth.
The living quarters, the area where our protagonists hold up, that was not actually part of the mall. You'll see featured in the film stairs going up to, where they're living, but that door and those stairs don't actually lead to that. That was actually part of George Romero's production company in Pittsburgh, I believe, the Latent Image. The gun shop was also not part of the mall. They had that set made up elsewhere as well. You wouldn't know it by watching it. It works. All right. At some point in the movie, Peter is attacked at the helicopter port by a couple of zombie children. Those are actually relatives of Tom Savini, the makeup artist. Ken Foree was actually a little uncomfortable shooting that scene because he was taking out the kids. The bikers at the end, most of them were actually real bikers from, I think the group was the Pagans. So they got to have their fun. And George Romero has actually stated that hearing that echo and that reverb from all those within the mall is nothing like he's heard before. It was just deafening but awesome. In the end, the MPAA found so many things wrong with this film. I mean, just so many things. And they told Romero, they're like, look, we're not going to release it with an R rating until you make some cuts. Otherwise, it's going to NC-17. They couldn't make those cuts. I mean, that would completely neuter the film. So they took their hit and went with the NC-17 rating. It was rated X. Well, at the time, it was rated X, which was for pornos. But it didn't hurt the reception. People were like ready for a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. On that note, I gotta say the riskiness with going with such a gory and violent film at the time, I think did an effective job at shocking, because the first time I saw it, things were happening like at the very beginning where I'm like, holy shit, like already? You know, like, where is this movie gonna go? In fact, it's that very scene I referred to earlier with the Miguel character that first drew me in. I got the message. We're not fucking around. This is what we have in store. And that's why I like that scene so much. It gives you a glimpse of the intensity this film's going to bring. It has its lulls, but when it spikes, that's what you get. It's that intensity. I think ultimately they did everything right with this film. And that is all I got to say about that.
Thanks for joining us on This Movie Needs More Flavor. If you enjoyed what you heard, you could always like, share, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and follow us on Instagram. All that fun and flavorful stuff that really helps us out a bunch. Our info is in the bio. Thanks again, and keep listening.
That is our take for the 1978 cult classic Dawn of the Dead. We thank you for listening, and until next time, take care.